profile.
Thank you so much for coming. This is a wonderful audience. We have a packed house tonight, which is very exciting for Malvern, a lot of friendly faces, and 2 spectacular poets. So thank you so much for coming. There's plenty of food available, and there will be a signing afterwards, so please stick around. So I'll get started. A scholar and a translator, as well as a poet and editor, Kurt Heinzelman is a counselor of the Texas Institute of Letters. His first book, The Halfway Tree, was a finalist for the Natalie Ornish Award in 2012. And Poetry International cited the names they found there as the best book of the year in 2011. Whatever you may say is his 5th book of poetry. A judge of the International Dylan Thomas Prize, Heinzelman is an honorary professor at Swansea University, Wales. He is also a professor specializing in poetry and poetics at the University of Texas. Please welcome Kurt.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks very much. You'll please forgive my voice today. A combination, a cocktail of elm and ragweed and mold has taken over my throat, so I'm going to do the best I can. You're suffering as well? Good. I'm sorry. Just very quickly, for those of you who have not been to Malvern Books before, this is a very unique bookstore. It has nothing but poetry and fiction, and poetry and fiction in translation, all by small presses. So these are books that you won't find, even at Book People or Amazon. This is a totally unique bookstore, and before you leave today, take some time to look around and see if anything catches your eye. Small presses, as you know, are the heartblood, the heartbeat, what keeps American literature going. In the 18th century, one of the most popular forms of poetry publication was the so-called verse miscellany. These collections would include poems in a wide variety of verse forms, genres, subject matters, translations, so as to include other voices in the miscellany. And sometimes they would even include poems by other poets, much in the way today we're going to include my work and Danielle Sellers. In my book, I've tried to embrace this inclusive model of the miscellany, as I hope you'll see shortly. But there are poems too long to share with you today. There's a one-person play that has been given a theatrical performance, but it was first presented as a choreographed piece for a single dancer, and was subsequently reprised as a dance for 2 and even 3 performers, which astonished me. The book also contains a children's poem called The Heinzelman. These are the creatures who, under the cover of night, emerge from the forest to do the unfinished labors that the tradesmen in town are too lazy to accomplish. And my poem is a translation of a German poem by a man named Kopisch. And finally, there's an extended valedictory address given at an imaginary graduation, not by a graduating student, but by a professor. It's one of my favorites, but it's too long to read today. We're going to read today sandwich style. I'm going to read for probably 15 minutes or so, and then Danielle is going to take over and read, and then I'm going to come back and do a finale, a very short finale. So we'll probably be finished in 45 minutes or 50 minutes or so. So the first poem that I'm going to start with today is called a canzo, C-A-N-S-O. It's a word that simply means chanson or song, and was the most popular verse form used by the Provençal troubadours. I haven't tried to duplicate the metrical and rhyme schemes of the original, which are quite complex, but only to capture the spirit of that medieval novel. Anyway, the setting for the poem is Texas. I didn't think Provençal rhyme schemes were really appropriate. This is called Early Morning Canzo. It has an epigraph by the cultural critic Rebecca Solnit. Blue is the light that gets lost. Awake now, I'm watching that dog barking through the blinds. A strobe light effect, like Emily's dashes, but in sonnets. Fritillaries mingle amid passion flowers. Hummingbirds anticipate the unfolding salvia. Here are the oscillations between a wanting that is peculiar to the apple and what is attainable only when all that's blue calves like ice into deeper blue. Emily is Emily Dickinson. We got it. This next poem is a less artful in one sense, but more vernacular and more personal. The three characters are Riker, a grandson, his mother, my daughter, and his grandmother, my wife, whose family nickname is Amu. It's called Riker's Reveille. Wake up, he said, it's morning time. He went to ask his mother what time it was, sent by his mother's mother, Amu, who was in sleep time still. 10 to 8, he returned in no time. Are you sure, asked Amu, that that's the time? He went to ask his mother what that was again. What was, she asked. He said again what that time was. 10 past 8, she said. And that was what that time was, he said again, coming back to tell his Amu this time. And keeping with the morning theme for just a moment, here is a translation by Heinrich Heine, from Heinrich Heine. Heine was a German lyric poet who was forced out of Germany and forced to live in Paris. He was terribly ill. He could barely get out of bed. He had all sorts of disfiguring and disabling problems. And he had a common law wife who was illiterate. And nobody could understand how it happened that these two people ended up together. But he loved her and she took care of him in his terrible physical disability. So this is a kind of love poem, but as you'll see, Heine always has a kind of satirical edginess to him, even in the midst of expressing his gratitude for his woman. It's called Early One Morning. She's got my breakfast laid on, dark roast coffee, double cream, my loving, lovely wife. She wasn't really his wife. Who pours it out herself, joking, flirty, smiling with lips like nothing else in Christendom. I want to say her voice is like a flute, or like angels. But no, what do I know of perfect? She is a perfect beauty. What should be lily white is. The way that hair should frame a face, it does. Which is why it's odd this morning to see that she could be a bit more slender. Yes, just a bit slender. See what I mean? This is another kind of love poem called Towing the Line, like Mason and Dixon. She taught you how poetry happens in the mouth, how the name of a sound is not the sound of the sound. Happy is not the same P as promise. She warned you how QWERTY might keep you from touching her intimate folds, her little tower, or from naming her favorite composers, Rimsky-Korsakov, Dominic Argento, with your palate and tongue. If there were birds outside you couldn't name, with a whistling that ended in garbling, You are not to kill, she said, any mockingbird, even if it grackles. When she called you lovebird, her lips met and parted carefully. And then she brought you to a kind of Natchez trace, a ripple creasing the deep south of your stomach that made you long to pull over and eat with her at Birmingham and Macon, because everywhere else you went, there was only hunger. That's a slightly more challenging poem, both to read and probably to hear. And this one is also kind of love poem, a related love poem, and tonally is a little different from these others. It's called Afterwards. Reading it just now, I knew they had started the slippages one must learn to expect. Those commonplaces, it is commonplace not to place too precisely. What I read about was you, that you died. What I remembered then was how surrounded we'd been by all those ducks, the green air faintly fair but failing, as we talked of how many vectors lives at 20 could take, how joy shakes so many hands before going indoors. We were tossing crumbs onto the redolent grass and into the smoking lake. You spoke of how the unexpected pregnancy possessed you with alarming liquidities, of how you loved him and would join him after finals. And yet you seemed to be tossing in the air wine glasses that never landed on any floor you'd walk barefoot across for the rest of your life. That's how you put it back then, your voice grasping the gunnels of your next half century, for which we had become odd spectators, you and I, two old people who don't stop speaking just because someone else is speaking. And so we ended up kissing. Not the kind of kissing one kisses so as not to talk anymore, hoping for something more, but only to stop talking. Up then, but it happened so much later, from that duck muddle arose this new sense. Just because something happens doesn't make it true, only real. And now I'll conclude this section. With a kind of elegy. It's a peculiar elegy because most elegies are about the people or the person who died, and this one is not explicitly about that. You remember the Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 that was shot down in Ukraine? Yes, by Russian-backed separatists. For weeks, access was denied to the spot where the plane went down. The site of the wreckage was fields of sunflowers. Remember all that? So this poem is called Bodies Fallen in Fields of Sunflowers. Once in full bloom, their faces stop turning to follow the sun. Their stems are rough and hairy, but their flowers daisy-like, for really, they are members of the aster family, like those reddish ones there in that white bowl. 3 millennia before Christ, America's native peoples cultivated these flowers of the sun. They thought more important even than corn. Their Spanish conquerors brought the seeds home to Europe. In the 19th century, the Tsar's botanists hybridized the commercially viable mammoth Russian sunflower, principally for its oil, judged acceptable by the Orthodox at Lent. Returned to the New World near the beginning of the American century, The plants were used as silage for hogs before their full uses were discovered anew. Driving near Gratiot, Wisconsin, I passed by field after field of them, sown in that sober, four-square prairie way, so that the road, turning always at right angles, left you unable to see over or around them. My father, riding shotgun beside me, told of our family, how they came from a village in the kingdom of Württemberg, neither of which exists any longer, so many wars later. Having escaped the Prussian conscription of their sons, they were hoping to land where bodies could stand tall as sunflowers under spacious skies amid amber waves of grain.